Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast. We cover everything Major League, from spring training to the World Series. We've got your favorite club covered, from New York to Boston to LA. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast.
All right, welcome back, y'all, to the GSMC Baseball Podcast. My name is Patrick Kenny, and today I think I got a good show for y'all. Y'all can follow me on Twitter at Patrick Kenny, Kenney _, or follow us on Twitter at GSMC _baseball. We'd love to hear from y'all. Leave us a review on Apple iTunes podcast. Share us on Spotify. Leave a comment on YouTube. We want to give y'all the best show that we can. So today I think I got a good show for y'all. We're going to be talking about which steroid users are going to or should make it into the Hall of Fame, and which steroid users probably shouldn't make it into the Hall of Fame. But just looking at based on what happened with them, who they were as a player, and then whether or not steroids helped them enough to get into the Hall of Fame, or if they were a Hall of Famer already. And then I'm going to go over some of the top rookies and then give y'all my Rookie of the Year and a Dark Horse candidate for y'all to check out. I know we did the Dark Horse candidate sort of stuff last week in one of my episodes, but I want to give y'all my top takes. And then we're going to go over some really important spring training stat lines that matter. And then finally, we're going to end today's episode with the story of Roger Maris, and specifically his 61 home runs that he hit in 1961, because this year is the 60th anniversary of that happening. So with that being said, without further ado, let's just get right into it. So the first guy I want to talk about is Jose Canseco, and he quite literally wrote the book on juicing in baseball, and in retrospect, he was a whistleblower that did change baseball. That changed baseball, whether it was better or not. He definitely blew the whistle on this. And while Canseco was a very good player during his day, especially while he was juicing, and he even had the first ever 40-40 season, none of his seasons were very amazing. Like, other than that season, he just didn't have a great career. He did hit 462 home runs, but with that being said, his stats just really aren't that impressive to me. I mean, his career WAR was a 42.5, which is a very good career WAR, and it makes sense that he was as good as he was in his day, but that doesn't necessarily scream Hall of Famer. The MLB Baseball Hall of Fame is without a doubt the toughest Hall of Fame in American sports to get into. Basketball sort of realizes, oh, you were really good during this time, well, you deserve a spot in the Hall of Fame. And football is sort of similar. There are other guys like Clay Matthews' father, who probably should have been in the Hall of Fame, but for whatever reason isn't in the Hall of Fame. It just makes it harder to get in the Hall of Fame, and for that reason, there's Jose Canseco just isn't one guy that necessarily deserves to be in the Hall of Fame based on his career, regardless of steroids or not. And the steroids probably helped him quite a bit in his career, if nothing more than to stay healthy, or to help him get a little bit healthier in his career, and cut back on injuries and that kind of thing. Up next is Jason Giambi. In 2004, he admitted to using HGH, or human growth hormone, as well as some other steroids in the early 2000s, and he sort of apologized for it, sort of not so apologetic for it, but at his best, he was an MVP, had a 176 OPS plus, and 41 home runs a year between 2000 and 2003. But like Canseco, his final OPS plus is just 139. and he only hit 440 homers, which granted is quite a bit, and he has a decent WAR, but he would fall short even if it weren't with PEDs, even if he didn't have the help of PEDs. His overall career WAR is just a 50.5, and while that's good, it's just not good enough to get to that very top level of the Hall of Fame. And while the average WAR for baseball players in general is between 50 and 70, it's just not enough with PEDs to even really be considered for the Hall of Fame. And Giambi was one heck of a player back in his day, but he just wasn't Hall of Fame caliber. And while he was good, and his 440 career home runs and 50.5 WAR is just barely short of Cooperstown standards, I just don't think that he gets in because he did use steroids, and the Writers Association that votes on this just isn't great for him right here. Up next is Manny Ramirez. So if Manny Ramirez only had that first positive test in the really bad 2003 test, I think that he would definitely be in the Hall of Fame. But the problem is that Ramirez didn't stop using steroids after that first positive test. In 2009, he had a 50-game suspension because he tested positive for the second time, and then 2 years later, he had to retire in 2011 because he was facing a 100-game suspension after his second positive test. I mean, otherwise, Manny Ramirez is one of the best hitters that we've ever seen. He had a career batting line of 300, 400, and 500, so that's an above 300 average, an above 400 on base percentage, and an above 5,000 slugging, over at least 9,000 plate appearances in the bigs. He hit over 5,500 home runs 555 home runs in his regular season, plus 29 in the postseason. He was a 12-time All-Star and 2-time World Series champion. But thanks to his defense, his career his career WAR isn't great. His career WAR is actually pretty astounding when you consider how good of a player he was just hitting the baseball. And listen to some of these stats. His career overall offensive WAR was 81.8, and his career defensive WAR was a negative 21.7, which brings his career WAR, his overall career WAR, to a 6.9 or 69.3, which is it's a very acceptable WAR. It really is. But I mean, if you look at the career leaders in baseball, he does rank still above Tony Gwynn, but he's nowhere near the best all time. I mean, Mike Trout right now is at a 74.5, and he's only had 10 years in the big leagues. If you go down, and he ranks 74th all time after 19 years in the bigs. Robinson Cano is sort of right behind him with a 69.1, and he'll probably, if he has a positive WAR this year, he'll definitely pass Manny Ramirez. But if he had even just an average WAR defensively, he would have been ranking near Ken Griffey Jr. He would have been in between Rod Carew and Ken Griffey Jr. So he would have been at about 36th or 37th place had he had just an average defensive WAR. But unfortunately for Manny Ramirez, he just didn't have that. And personally, I think Manny Ramirez deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. He did bring 2 World Series titles to Boston, and offensively, he's one of the greatest hitters of all time. Up next, I would go with a soft no on him, honestly, just because if just because he tested positive for that second time, which means he never stopped using steroids. Up next is Alex Rodriguez. Now, Alex Rodriguez has completely revamped his entire career and his entire persona after just completely destroying all of his credibility. And if you've ever seen the documentary Screwball with by Billy Corbin, it definitely doesn't paint Alex Rodriguez in the best light, but he's an all-time great regardless of Cooperstown, just based on his numbers. In his career, he had a 22-year career from 1994 to 2016. He had a 140 OPS plus and 696 home runs for fourth all-time. He had a 117.5 WAR, which is 12th all-time, and he was a 14-time All-Star, 10-time Silver Slugger, and a 2-time Gold Glover, as well as a 3-time MVP. He only got one World Series ring in 2009, but he definitely deserved it that year. However, he had a positive test result from 2003, which he admitted in 2009, and he admitted it because he felt the pressure of signing the biggest contract in baseball, and he wanted to live up to it with the Texas Rangers. He was obviously traded to New York, but he only admitted to using it from 2001 until 2003, and then a few years later, he was really caught up in the biogenesis scandal and was suspended for the entire 2014 season. One could argue that his achievements outweigh his misdeeds with the PEDs. He only tested positive twice, and at this point in time, he's completely revamped his entire career. He'll be up for voting, I believe, this year for the first time. So I don't think he's going to get in this year, but I do think that he'll get in eventually. I definitely think that his accomplishments are pretty great, and it would be a shame to not have him in Cooperstown for sure. Personally, I think that he deserves to be in it, but my position honestly has softened quite a bit in Major League Baseball or on PEDs since I was a little kid. I just kind of accept them for it. Using the phrase that everybody was doing, it doesn't make it good or even okay, but I think that it makes it a little bit better than if it were just one person. And plus, hitting a baseball is hard, and steroids don't help you hit the baseball. They might help you get on the field to hit the baseball, and they might make your recovery time a lot shorter so that you feel 100% for longer. But I don't think that steroids necessarily are even that big of an issue for baseball players. So nobody really took it serious. Up next is obviously is Mark Mcguire, one guy that I absolutely think deserves to be in the Hall of Fame because him and Sami Sosa they saved baseball. Baseball was dying at the time in the 90s. Nobody was coming to the games, and their home run race got people interested in baseball and made baseball matter again. And I think baseball is experiencing a similar time right now, and baseball just doesn't matter like it used to, and I think that's a shame. But Mark Mcguire definitely helped save baseball. So there was an early tip-off to Mark Mcguire using PEDs amid his him hitting 70 home runs in 98. And then 12 years later, in 2010, Mark Mcguire confessed to the Associated Press that he didn't just use steroids in 1998, but on and off throughout his entire career. Mcguire would be a shoo-in for Cooperstown. He has a 163 OPS plus and 583 home runs, which put him in a very small group of really good hitters, just like Alex Rodriguez. By WAR, he's one of the 12 best first basemen in history, and he also won a Rookie of the Year, was a 12-time All-Star, and won a World Series. I mean, there's no separating Mcguire's confession from PEDs at all out of his career. I mean, he admitted it, and I think that the fact that he admitted it was what it should have been enough. But I think that I think that Mcguire deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. One of the best 12 first basemen in history by WAR. He was a Rookie of the Year and a 12-time All-Star. Hit 583 home runs in his career, and has a decent OPS plus. I think Mcguire should be in the Hall of Fame. Up next is his counterpart, Sami Sosa. He only got 13.9% of the vote in 2020, but Sosa is still receiving Mcguire-level support, so not a lot of support on the ballot after his 8 years on the ballot so far. And that makes his legacy is just tied to Mark McGuire's. I will say, though, that Sosa has still denied ever using PEDs. And aside from Jose Canseco's testimony and vaguely incriminating him in an encounter of a Sports Illustrated article in 2002, the strongest evidence that he did use PEDs was in 2003. He definitely did use steroids. That is absolutely for sure. But at least in my opinion, and that's one of the reasons I don't think that he deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. Even though he and Mark McGuire worked hand in hand in trying to get the bigs back to where it was. He hit over 600 home runs in his career, and he's only one of 9 people to do that. He hit 292 of those in a 5-year span from 1998 to 2002, when he became the only player ever to rack up 3 seasons with at least 60 home runs. I think that. So I don't think that he should be allowed in, and he does have an okay career WAR with a 58.6, and his OPS plus is a 128. But I don't think that he's that. I looking back at his stats and the fact that he's never admitted to using steroids when his counterpart Mark McGuire did, especially after hitting almost 300 home runs of your career in 5 years. Either the baseball's juiced, the bat's juiced, or you're juiced. Like there's no way around that. So I'm gonna have to go with a no on Sami Sosa just because he has denied using them, and he does have more plausible deniability than Mark McGuire does with PEDs. But I still don't think I still don't think that Sami Sosa deserves to be in it, just because he refuses to admit to something that we all kind of expect him to do, or expect him to have done. Up next is going to be David Ortiz. He only has one connection to steroids, and that's the 2003 test. Even though Rob Manfred warned everybody not to look at that at face value, if your name was on that list in 2016, it's entirely possible, or he said this in 2016, that it's entirely possible that you weren't not positive. So, I mean, that does look good a little bit for Sami Sosa, but still, it's not great for him. But David Ortiz, 541 home runs throughout his 20-year career, 141 OPS plus, played about 70% of his games in the post-2005 era of testing and punishment for PED. So, Tom Verducci, he told Tom Verducci, quote, "Let me tell you that there's not one player in baseball that has been tested more than David Ortiz. I'll tell you that." And the fact that he didn't have any other tests positive for him is definitely a good reason, as much as any, to get him into the Hall of Fame. He's one of the best postseason and regular season hitters in history. He's just a beast. And in one of the World Series that he hit 455 for an average, a 576 on base percentage, and a 795 slugging percentage in all three of his World Series. So he's going to be a for sure yes. And up next, and I know the segment's running a little bit long, but I got to throw in Barry Bonds here. 7-time MVP, 14-time All-Star. He does have the single season and the career home run records, as well as an all-time mark for walks. He 73 home runs in a single season, 762 home runs for a career, and 2,558 for walks, and 668 intentional walks. His OPS plus is only bettered. Is the only two people that have a better OPS plus is Babe Ruth and Ted Williams, and neither of them come close to his WAR of 162.8. Bonds did admit in 2004 to using steroids by his personal trainer, Greg Anderson. And like Gary Sheffield, Bonds' concession was that he didn't know what he was using, but given that he was surely closer to Anderson than Gary Sheffield, his claims of ignorance don't work quite as well. These two were really tight. I think that at one point they were described as best friends, if not at least friends. So there's no way that he didn't know that he wasn't being injected. Bonds was also really unpleasant, especially to the media. He probably would have been in the Hall of Fame already if he hadn't, if he wasn't just such a jerk to the media members. But he's getting a decent amount of support, but he's got to get 75% in the next year or two. Otherwise, that he won't get in. But I absolutely think that Barry Bonds deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. So that's going to do it for this segment. We're going to be right back in just a minute with my Rookie of the Year and some other players to watch out for this year.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
And what's going on, everybody? Welcome back in. My name is Patrick Kenny, and in this segment, we're going to do a sort of look at who could be the potential Rookie of the Year this year. I have a few ideas. I definitely have a couple prospects in mind, but there's definitely a bunch of good options this year. I mean, there's just a ton of really good young prospects this year. So one guy that I think everybody should look out for is the second baseman for the White Sox, Nick Madrigal. His prospect rank is 40 out of the top 100, and Madrigal has separated his left shoulder early in August last year, but opted not to have surgery until after the season. And when he came back, he hit 349 over the last 24 games, and then collected 3 hits in the postseason as well. It's a sign of good things to come when he's healthy for sure. Overall in 2020, he hit 340 and had a 369 slugging percentage, and then only struck out 7 times in the 109 plate appearances that he had. He also had 4 walks and 3 doubles in those in his brief plate appearances, but he definitely flashed some real good signs of just who he could be as a player, and I definitely think that he's a really good guy to win this. Another guy y'all should keep your eyes out for is Ke'Bryan Hayes in the National League. Nick Madrigal obviously in the American League, but Ke'Bryan Hayes, He is the number 9 prospect in the top 100, and he's going to be the everyday third baseman for the Pirates this year for sure. He hit 376 at a 442 on base percentage and a 682 slugging percentage, and it's in the 24 game big league debut in 2020, and he received multiple Rookie of the Year votes last year, and he's still technically a rookie this year because he only got to play the 24 games, so he's still a really good prospect to win that. To win that award this year. He also has a very good WAR, and because of how good of a defender he is as well. And it gives him a really high floor and a really high ceiling as well. Last season, he also showed his power, and he definitely has a chance to absolutely run away with the National League Rookie of the Year this year. He is going to be an absolute stud for some time to come. Up next is Ian Anderson, a right-handed pitcher for the Braves. Anderson was already the second best pitcher in Atlanta's starting rotation during his first trip to the Bigs last year. His fastball was averaging 94 miles an hour, and he also has a really good curveball and changeup that generates a really good whiff rate of about 40%. The bet is that it's not going to be a mirage, and that his dominant run last season wasn't just sort of rookie luck. He also did really well during the postseason. He struck out 24 batters while only allowing 2 earned runs in the 18 2/3 innings that he pitched during the postseason last year, and it just further proved that he shouldn't be intimidated by the major league hitters that he's going to face every day. And especially, I definitely think that Ian Anderson, if he comes out and pitches as well as he did last year, that he could absolutely be the best pitcher on the Braves staff, and with that lead them to a potential division win and maybe even Rookie of the Year and potential Cy Young award as well. He's definitely got that kind of talent this year. Up next is, back to the American League, is Randia Rosarina. Rosarina was an absolute beast last year. Definitely one of the best guys in the league that's coming up for sure. But he went absolutely off the wall last year. I mean, just look at his stats; they're ridiculous. He hit 377 and 442 on base percentage and a 821 slugging percentage with 10 home runs and 20 playoff games last year. He's definitely the favorite to win the Rookie of the Year in the American League, but there are fewer candidates in the American League than the National League. And there are swing and miss concerns with the Rosarina, but he should hit probably 270 or higher and hit at least 30 home runs and 15 steals this year. So I think that he's definitely a really good guy to check out. Up next, I'm going to go back to the National League, and we're going to go to Ha-Seong Kim, an infielder for the Padres. It's clear that he's going to get a lot of at-bats this year, but it just doesn't know where he's going to get them from. He's not eligible in the top 100 prospect rankings because he's coming from the KBO League in Korea, but he's definitely already going to be a really good player. He signed a 4-year, $28 million contract after last year in the KBO. He can hit for power, he can control his strike zone very well, and he can steal a few bases. I think that he's probably going to hit about I would say about 80 to 90 with an on-base percentage around the 370s, and then a slugging percentage around the high 400s, and then probably about 10 to 20 home runs, and then a few steals as well. The only problem with him is that he's already going to be in the he's already played professional baseball for a while. So I think that if he comes out and has a good season, that he'll definitely get some votes this year if he can post some numbers like that. But I don't necessarily think that he's going to be a great option for you if you were betting on the Rookie of the Year. Up next, for the National League, I have Dylan Carlson of the the St. Louis Cardinals. He's an outfielder. His prospect rank is 13 out of 100, and he did struggle last year in his first call up to the bigs, and he got sent down to the alternate training site. But when he came back, he posted an OPS over 1,000 and then hit cleanup in the wild card series. So he definitely was a good player when he finally settled down, and he is definitely going to be a 2020 player right out of the gate. He's going to be a guy that's going to steal a lot of bases, and then also he can hit for a little bit of power as well. He's only going to be 22 for this season, and he's also pretty good defensively as well. So I think that Dylan Carlson of the Cardinals is a very good shot for National League Rookie of the Year. And then going back over to the American League, we're going to go to Jared Kelenic of the Mariners. He is the number 4 ranked prospect out of MLB's top 100. And the Mariners have a whole lot of talent in their system right now. 2 straight Rookie of the Year's winners seems kind of doubtful, though, after Kyle Lewis won last year in 2020. But it seems like you could honestly, even with the Mariners, with Julio Rodriguez, he's not expected to get called up until 2022. But it's possible that the Mariners could win 3 straight Rookie of the Years, which is pretty impressive. Kelenic has shown consistent power throughout his career in the minors, and we've already seen 2 bombs from him from spring training this year. He definitely hits the ball hard, plus he's pretty fast and he's got a strong arm in the outfield as well. So definitely pay attention to Jared Kelenic of the Mariners this year. He's definitely going to have a very, very good shot at doing something special this year. So up next is Andrew Vaughn of the White Sox. So Vaughn's prospect rank is 14 in MLB's top 100. This dude can absolutely mash. There's a really good shot that his career he's going to hit over 300 as an average and then hit 30 home runs annually. He doesn't have a lot of professional at-bats just yet, but the fact that the White Sox are talking a contract extension with him now, figuring out a way to get him in the lineup every day, he's obviously going to have to be more than a DH, and he is more than a DH, but right now the White Sox don't necessarily have a real shot or a real spot for him, considering he is a first baseman. So I could see them sort of, doing a sort of like a 50-50, you're going to play one day, and then obviously Vaughn plays the next day type deal with Jose Abreu, who's obviously had a really, really good year, or really good career, not year. So I'm sort of running out of really good rookies, but I do have a couple left over. I definitely think that my dark horse for the National League is absolutely Sixto Sanchez. He is the number 15th prospect in the bigs, out of the top 100. His fastball last year, when we got a glimpse, just a glimpse to see him, he was averaging 98.5 miles an hour on his four-seamer and then 96.6 miles an hour on his sinker. This dude can absolutely chunk. The only other pitcher to throw harder on an average of 100 fastballs is the velocity king of Jacob deGrom. Last year, Sanchez came into camp, or this year he came into camp with a new number, wearing number 45, which is also the number that Pedro Martinez wore his entire career. So I think that Sanchez has a really good shot at winning the National League Rookie of the Year this upcoming year, especially if he can do his best to get the Marlins in playoff consideration down the stretch. And if he pitches well and it's not his fault that or he doesn't like fall off or something during like a late stretch in the year, I really do think that Sixto Sanchez can win the Rookie of the Year out of just out of the National League, just based on how close that he can help keep the Marlins in the race. If they're winning games every day that he pitches, and he's pitching well during those days, going 6 or 7 innings, striking out 7 to 10 batters a game, and his fastball is still lively, I really think that Sixto Sanchez can absolutely be the ace that could carry the Marlins into the playoffs this year for sure. So up next is the last guy we're going to be talking about today, and he is one of the best prospects I think that I've ever seen. He's definitely my favorite prospect in the bigs right now, but it's definitely got to be Wander Franco. He is the number one prospect in Major League Baseball, and he's been Major League Baseball's number one prospect for a while now. He is on the same team as a Rosarina, so you're gonna see less of him in the bigs, but it's gonna be hard for both of them to share the spotlight. But I really think that Franco is the guy. He could win the American League batting title right out of the gate. He might clean up on awards this year. I could definitely see him taking home the Triple Crown for batting, maybe even this year. There's a possibility that he wins the American League MVP, American League Rookie of the Year, and the batting title, and maybe even a Silver Slugger or a Gold Glove award as well. So the Rays might move him to third base, though. He does have one Grapefruit League start at third, but if he were, I really think that he's a great player. And even if the Rays make the roster necessities to move him to third base, the bat is going to be special enough to get him plenty of consideration. And if he were to win this award, he would join Ronald Acuna Jr., Jose Fernandez, Bryce Harper, and Mike Trout as the most recent players to win Rookie of the Year in their age 20 season. And I think that is just the best possible possibility for Wander Franco. He is just an absolute stud. He's definitely my pick to win Rookie of the Year in the American League for sure. I mean, in the National League, I think it's a little bit more of a toss-up. I think that there is more of there are a few different people that you could do. You could do Ke'Bryan Hayes or Ian Anderson or even Sixto Sanchez. But I think that in the American League, I think it comes down to either a Rosarina or Wander Franco. And then the Rays also have guys like Shane Baz in the pipeline as well. And I think that the Rays and the Mariners, as well as in the American League, the Rays and the Mariners are building some of the best teams with some of the best talent that I think I've ever seen. I mean, in Baseball America, his rankings, Baseball America in pre-2018, he was the 96th ranked overall. In 2019, number 4. 2020 and 21, the number 1. In Major League Baseball, had him in 2019 as the number 13th ranking. In 2020 and 21, he has been the number 1 ranked prospect. And then in the fact that in 2018 he was what was it? He's going into his age 20 season this year, so that is his age. While he's 17, Baseball America already had him ranked as the 96th best prospect in baseball. It's kind of absurd. Now, he only got 29 plate appearances last year in the spring so far, and he's only hit 207, which isn't great, and he hasn't had any walks, but he's still definitely a really good guy, and I think that he's got to have the best shot at winning some really good base or to winning. I mean, his batting average in the 2 years that he's been in the minors is 336. It's 336, and the 2 years that he played in foreign leagues in 2019 and 2020, just in winter ball, he hit 261. So, I mean, that's not great, but for every level that he's played at, his on-base percentage is near 400 at 399. His slugging percentage for his career, all combined up until this point, is 515. His OPS is a 914. It's crazy, and he's also hit 22 home runs at all levels so far in the few years that he's been there. So I think that he definitely has a real shot at doing something special this year. So him and Sixto Sanchez are definitely my favorite prospects to look at this year. Y'all should definitely check them out. If you're in a state where betting is legal, I would definitely pick those two guys. So don't go anywhere. Coming up right next in just a few minutes, we're going to go over some stat lines and players to pay attention to for this upcoming year.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
All right, everybody, and welcome back in to this episode, or this segment of the GSMC Baseball Podcast. So I think this one is a little interesting. This segment, we're going to be talking about just different guys that are really important stat lines that y'all should be paying attention to. So first, we're going to start out over in Chicago on the south side with the White Sox. We're going to go over a few pitchers right here, and so earlier this year, or in a few earlier episodes, I said that the White Sox didn't have a great bullpen, but so far, their bullpen is balling out. So Cody Hewer, Garrett Crotchet, Evan Marshall, Aaron Bummer, and Michael Kopech are right-handed and left-handed relief pitchers for the White Sox. So Cody Hewer so far this spring has pitched 8 innings, hasn't given up a run, has struck out 13 batters, and his whip is a .5. And then you go over to Crockett. He's pitched in 7 innings. His ERA is a 2.57. He's struck out 7 batters, and his whip is a 1.14. If Crockett continues and on that pace and in the bigs this year, he absolutely is going to just have one. He's going to have one of the best years as is Hewer. But if that is as high as his ERA goes this year, and he can continue to strike out a batter an inning and keep his whip down, that's going to be amazing. If you go over to Evan Marshall, he's pitched in 6 innings. His ERA is 1.50. His whip is a .5, and he's struck out 12 batters. That's 2 batters an inning. That is really good. I mean, it's honestly kind of astronomical if you really think about it. And then you go over to Aaron Bummer, and Bummer's stats aren't great right now. He is striking out quite a bit of batters, but he got roughed up. It does look like in at least one appearance. I haven't seen any of his actual outings, but it does look like that he has gotten roughed up. He's pitched in 5 2/3 innings, a 4.76 ERA. His WHIP is a .71, and his ERA is a 4.76. Now I expect that to go down during the season, but even so, that's not a terrible ERA. It's not great by any stretch of the imagination, but it looks like he just kind of got roughed up one time in one outing, and that's going to happen. But striking out 8 batters and a whip that low is really, really impressive. And then you go over to Michael Kopech, and you have he's pitched in 5 1/3 innings, has an ERA of a 1.69, and he struck out 7 batters, and his whip is a 1.13. So that is just as good as some of the other guys on there. And this bullpen is looking kind of dangerous, especially if they can keep up like this pace. You also have Liam Hendricks there for a second, but the White Sox might have a super bullpen sort of around Liam Hendricks, and some really good relievers just around Liam Hendricks to get him to that closing role. They all look really filthy. If you look at the Pitching Ninja on Twitter, he's put out a lot of these pitchers. I mean, they all have overpowering fastballs that sit in the high 90s and sometimes reach the triple digits. They all have nasty breaking balls and off-speed stuff to pair off with the heat, and they come at you from both sides of the mound, both the right and the left side. So that is really, really impressive. So the next guy we're going to talk about is Tejay Anton of the Reds. His spring training stats so far are 7 2/3 innings pitched, a 1.17 ERA, and a 15.3 strikeouts per 9 out of his 13 strikeouts that he has already. That's pretty absurd. He's 26 years old, or he's going into his age 27 season. Last year he was a 26-year-old rookie. He had a 2.80 ERA, 45 strikeouts in the 35 1/3 innings that he had in a swingman type role for the Reds last year. He looks more like a late bloomer than a fluke so far. His strikeout numbers this spring are just as dominant as they were last year. He has top-tier velocity and spin rate, and his fastball in spring training right now is sitting at 96 miles an hour with a 2,700 RPMs. Last year, he was averaging a 95.6 mile an hour fastball, and his RPMs were 2,625. His breaking balls are averaging more than 3,000 RPMs, and that's RPM is rotations a minute. Obviously, the ball is not rotating that much because it doesn't take a minute to get to the plate. But that means his fastball is spinning so fast, and his breaking balls are spinning even more. And the more your breaking ball spins, the more movement it's going to have. And if he can control that, he's going to be a very dangerous pitcher this year. He is dealing with a hip and a groin injury right now, but they do seem minor, and he will be ready for the Reds on opening day, and where he's going to take a huge role for the Reds this season. Up next is Ian Anderson. Ian Anderson, so far in spring training, has pitched 9 2/3 of an inning. His ERA is a 4.66, 18 strikeouts, 3 walks, a 16.8 K through 9, and a 6 K walk to strikeout ratio, or strikeout to walk ratio, I should say. So that means he strikes out 6 batters for every 1 batter that he walks. Last year, he was one of the youngest pitchers who stepped into Mike Sorka's absence and helped get the Braves to that 2020 NL Championship Series. He's just 22 and had a 1.95 ERA last year during the stretch and a 0.96 ERA in the postseason. So if you're a Braves fan, and I know that I just talked about him potentially being one of the Rookie of the Years, but I expect him to definitely settle down and definitely bounce back from sort of a rough spring training so far. But his ERA is a little high, but he doesn't even have 10 innings pitched. And a lot of guys, especially starters, they're just trying to figure out what their mechanics are doing right now in the spring, and they're just trying to figure out what to do to help them get ready for the season, whereas guys who are minor leaguers or even maybe relief pitchers, they're trying to the goals are different. Ian Anderson already knows that he has a huge spot already on the Braves rotation, and that he really just doesn't need to focus on things like he needs to focus on things like control and his spin rate and that kind of deal, and focus on his mechanics and just making sure that he is okay for this year. Whereas other guys are really trying to just ramp up and make sure that they're getting a spot. So don't worry about Ian Anderson's high ERA so far this year. He's definitely the Braves' top pitching prospect and has struck out almost 2 batters an inning in spring training. Plus, his fastball changeup combo is just absolutely filthy. I really recommend you guys to look at the Pitching Ninja on Twitter, Rob Friedman, and he put his fastball overlay mechanics on this batter, and it is just absolutely absurd. He put that out on March 19th. If you guys want to scroll back and go try and find that. Up next is Kettle Marte for the Arizona Diamondbacks. He's a second baseman and center fielder for the Diamondbacks. He broke out in 2019 as a really good player. We've talked about him before, and he in 2019 was a great year for him, but he has a solid but not elite 2020 when his power numbers last year just dropped off. And here's the interesting thing about Marte is that when he hits the ball really hard, especially this spring. Marte has hit 5 balls over 110 miles an hour, which is tied with Giancarlo Stanton of any hitter so far this year, and he's ahead of Pete Alonso and Vladimir Guerrero Jr. Those 5 were a 114.7 mile an hour home run, a 113.6 mile an hour double, a 112 mile an hour single, and another 112 mile an hour single. And then he also lined out at 113 miles an hour. So if you're consistently hitting the ball over 110 miles an hour, you're going to put up some good numbers. So keep your eye on Kettle Marte this year for sure. His average, or his max exit velo was that home run. He's hitting in the 33 at-bats. He's hitting 333, a 667 slugging percentage, and his on-base, or his OPS is a 1,072. That he's having a fantastic spring, so expect him and keep your eye on him just to absolutely mash the rest of this year. And with spring training coming to a close, this is a very exciting year. So the next time that I'm actually going to talk to you guys is, I believe, the 31st. It's going to be the 31st. So that's the last day of spring of non-regular season baseball for this 2021 year. So I'll definitely have a recap of spring training for the 31st. But going back now to spring training, the next guy that we need to keep our eyes out is Ke'Bryan Hayes. He's had 37 appearances so far in spring training, a 432 average, a 784 slugging percentage, a 1,259 OPS. He's hit a home run, 6 doubles, 2 triples, and he has had 2 stolen bases. He's absolutely having a fantastic spring. And in 2020, he hit, in the 24 games that he played, he hit 376, had a 442 on base percentage, a 682, OPS. Slugging percentage, and 5 home runs with a 1,124 OPS. And he placed 6th in National League Rookie of the Year finishing, and he only played 24 games. So definitely a guy to keep your eyes out for, like we talked about last segment with the Rookie of the Year, especially the National League Rookie of the Year. And he has definitely had a fantastic spring this year. He's hitting 60. He's also running a 60.9% hard hit rate on the 23 track balls this spring, including a max out of a 110.3 exit velocity, and 43.5% of those balls have been hit at an 8 to a 32 degree launch angle, which is the sweet spot for your launch angle. So the ball is going to fly off of his bat for a lot of extra base hits and maybe a few home runs this year as well. Definitely got to keep your eyes out for him this year. Up next, the guy I want to talk about is Jameson Talion of the Yankees. He has thrown 8 1/3 innings. His ERA is a 1.08, 14 strikeouts, and a 15.1 K through 9. The Yankees did definitely value Talion when they traded for him, and he's 29 years old, still coming back from his second Tommy John injury, and he does need to prove that he is a front-end starter. And he looks good so far and through the spring. He's only allowed 1 run so far and has 14 strikeouts in his 8 1/3 innings. He has a new shortened arm action that looks really good and effective so far, and he has commanded his four-seamer a lot better and getting a lot of swings and misses at it. And he has broken 95 miles an hour, so all good signs coming back from his second Tommy John injury. Up next is Francisco Lindor. Lindor so far in the 38 plate appearances that he's had, he's hitting 342, a 684 slugging percentage, 4 home runs, and he is a superstar, but he had the worst hitting season of his career last year, especially in power. And I know as a Cleveland Indian fan, it hurt to watch him play as bad as he was playing. But so far in the Mets uniform, he's already doing a great job. He hit 4 home runs so far already through spring training. Still got a few days left, and these stats are coming as of March 24th. So obviously, by the time y'all are hearing this, these stats are going to be changing. But I do need to throw that disclosure out there just a little bit, just so y'all understand that this episode is being actually recorded on the 25th. That's just how it worked out in my schedule this year, or this week, guys. I am going on a trip at the end of the week, so I needed to kind of get this episode out, or episode recorded as soon as I could. So, I mean, Lindor, he's definitely, so back to Lindor, definitely a superstar. 2017 to 2019 hit 77 home runs of his 103 total, and only Arenado had more during that time. And for all of Lindor's spring training home runs, they've all been turned on and drilled down right field. So he's definitely pulling the ball from the left side of the plate, doing a great job so far this year. Up next, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. So far, he's had 25 plate appearances, hitting .520, a .606 on base percentage, and .840 slugging, a ridiculously high OPS of a 1,446. He's walked 6 times and struck out only twice. So far, his spring training performance is definitely looking like he is going to absolutely break out this year. Everybody's been waiting for his breakout. His spring training performance gives us a lot of hope this year in 2021. He's 22 years old, and he looks like he's a complete hitter now. He still has amazing exit velocity. He's ripped a 111-mile-an-hour home run and a 110-mile-an-hour double, and then a 111.4-mile-an-hour single. That's as hard as his hit ball that he's had this summer, and he got a single out of it. He's showing a lot of discipline at the plate with his 3-to-1 walk-to-strikeout ratio. And, I mean, the biggest thing that was holding him back from becoming a superstar is just airing the ball out. So, and he's starting to get the ball out off of his bat at a little bit of a higher rate now. So up next, last one we're going to talk about today is Shohei Ohtani. So pitching so far, 8 innings, a 7.88 ERA, 14 strikeouts, and a 15.8 K through 9. At the plate, he's hitting .600 in the 25 plate appearances so far, a slugging percentage of a 1,080, an OPS of a 1,701, and 4 home runs so far. So it looks like he's back to being a really good hitter and a really good strikeout pitcher. And he definitely needed that after a down year at the plate and the lost season last year on the mound. So he hit a 468 home run, foot home run already, and already has a few homers to center field and the opposite field. And he's already hitting 100 and 101 miles an hour back on the bump again. And that's very, very important for him, especially because his velocity dipped down to the low 90s last year, and concerns about his split finger, which is his best pitch, and he couldn't command it all last year. I wouldn't necessarily freak out about that ERA just yet, but in the 8, I think the important things are 8 innings pitched, 14 strikeouts. That is, and his velocity is back up to 100 miles an hour. So up next is the Roger Maris bio and other things that I'm going to talk about Roger Maris, because it is the 60th anniversary of that magical 61 home run season. I'll be right back in just a second.
Want to know the latest in soccer? Then listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast. From MLS, the World Cup, and the Premier League, we've got you covered. The latest updates, the hottest matches, and news on the league's top players. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast.
David Beckham scores the goal to take England all the way to the World Cup finals.
Listen now.
Alrighty, everybody, welcome back to this last segment, and this segment is a little special to me. So when I was growing up, my parents used to own stores, and during like the summers and stuff, we would hang out at the party store and dollar stores that we owned, or that my family owned. And I would just watch a whole bunch of movies. And one movie that I watched over and over and over again was 61 with the Asterisk by Billy Crystal, about the home run chase with Roger Maris and Mickey Mantle. And that movie helped me find, as well as like movies like Major League and Field of Dreams and Bull Durham and just so many other baseball movies but this one really stood out to me just because I actually had the movie and I watched it so many times that Roger Maris actually ended up becoming one of my favorite players for a very long time. So I'm going to give you guys like a little bit of who he was, and then we're going to talk a little bit about that 1961 season where he hit the 61 home runs. This is obviously the 60th anniversary of it, and I think that Maris's career was honestly one really impressive career. And personally, I do think that he should be in the Hall of Fame just because of my personal feelings toward him. But we'll go over that a little bit as well. So let's just get right into it. So Roger Eugene Maris was born on September 10th, 1934, in Hibbing, Minnesota. In 1955, his father changed his surname from Maris, M-A-R-A-S, to Maris, M-A-R-I-S. He was born to Rudolph S. Mary Maris and Ann Corney Connie, and he was born of Croatian heritage. Roger's brother Rudolph was a year older and developed polio at the age of 18, and his parents had a turbulent marriage that ended in divorce in 1960. His father died in Fargo in 1992 at the age of 81. After Maris retired from baseball, he moved to Gainesville, Florida, and where his mother had moved previously. His mother died in 2004 at the age of 90. Unfortunately for both of the Maris parents, their son did die definitely very young. In minor league baseball, when he started in minor league baseball, he was playing in the Indians organization at the Fargo Motorhead Twins in 1953. He was named the Rookie of the Year in the Northern League and then moved to Iowa the next season. He spent 4 years in the minors from 1953 to 1956. He hit .303 in the minors with 78 home runs. And then in Game 2 of the 1956 Junior World Series, Roger Maris, playing for the Indianapolis Indians of the American Association, or now known as the AAA League, set a record by driving in 7 runs in one game. With all 5 teams in which Maris played for in the minors, the club's win-loss record would improve for the prior season. Every time Roger Maris got to the new team, their record definitely improved. So he made his major league debut on April 16th, 1957 with the Cleveland Indians. 2 days later, he hit his first home run, and it was a grand slam off of Jack Kryman at Briggs Stadium in Detroit. He would finish his rookie season with 14 home runs, and on June 5th, 1958, he would play 51 games, hitting 9 home runs with the Indians, and then was traded to the Kansas City Athletics with Dick Tomac and Preston Ward for Vic Power and Woody Held. So his career began in 1957 with the Cleveland Indians and ended in 1958. And then with the Kansas City Athletics, he played in 99 games that first season in 1958 for the Kansas City Athletics. And in 1959, he played 122 games, hit 16 home runs. He missed 45 games in the second half of the season with an appendix operation. And then he was selected to play 2 All-Star games that were held that year. And he did play in both of those All-Star games. In the late 1950s, Kansas City frequently traded their best young players to the Yankees, a practice which referred to them as being the Yankees' major league farm team. That reminds me a little bit about the Cincinnati Reds a few years ago. It seemed like they were trading all of their best players to the Yankees. They did that for a couple seasons. But Maris was no expectation. He was dealt in a 7-player deal in December of 1959. He was sent to the Yankees with Kent Hadley and Joe DeMestri in exchange for Marv Thornberry, Norm Seinberg, Hank Bauer, and Don Larson. So that was that brings us to 1960, one of the best years that he had in his career. In 1960, Maris hit a single, double, and 2 home runs in his first game as a Yankee. He was named to the AL All-Star roster again and played in both games. He finished the season leading the American League in slugging percentage with a .581, runs batted in with 112 RBIs, and extra base hits with 64. He also hit 39 home runs that year and had a .283 batting average. He won the American League's Most Valuable Player that year in 1960 and was recognized as an outstanding outfielder with a Gold Glove award. The Yankees did win their pennant, which was the first of 5 consecutive pennants, but lost Game 7 of the World Series against the Pittsburgh Pirates with Bill Mazeroux's dramatic home run or the shot heard around the world. Willie Mays was on deck in that situation, but nevertheless, the Pirates ended up winning that World Series, but that wouldn't be the only time that Roger Maris would be back with the Yankees in the World Series. So that brings us to the 1961 season, and one of the most impressive seasons I think that I've ever actually studied really closely. So in 1961, the American League expanded from 8 teams to 10 teams, and in the expansion draft, the newly created Los Angeles Angels and Washington Senators were restricted to drafting players from American League rosters. The perceived result was that the American League teams had become watered down, and as a result, the players who otherwise had been playing in AAA, if not lower, were now in the American League. The Yankees, however, were left mainly intact in order to maintain a balanced schedule. American League owners extended the season from 154 games to 162 games. And in 1961, on January 13th, 1961, an Associated Press reporter asked Roger Maris whether the schedule change might threaten Babe Ruth's single-season home run record. And Roger Maris replied, "Nobody's going to touch it. Look up the records. You'll see that it's a rare year when anybody hits 50 home runs, let alone 60. The Yankees began hitting home runs at a record pace. One famous photograph lined up 6 1961 Yankees, including Mantle, Maris, Yogi Berra, Bill Skowron, under the nickname Murderers Row, because they hit a combined 165 home runs the previous year. The title Murderers Row was originally coined in 1918 and had been most famously used to refer for the 1927 Yankees. As the midseason approached, it seemed really possible that either Maris or Mickey Mantle could perhaps, or both of them actually, could break the 34-year-old Babe Ruth's home run record. Sports writers began to play the M&M boys against each other, inviting a rivalry where none existed. These two actually loved each other, and there's a documentary about Roger Maris that's actually narrated by Mickey Mantle. These two, they loved each other. They actually had an apartment together in New York that they would often stay at together, because both neither family was actually living in New York. Neither Maris's family or Mickey Mantle's family was living with them in New York, so they ended up getting an apartment together and living together. So more and more the Yankees became quote-unquote Mickey Mantle's team, and Roger Maris was just ostracized as the outsider, not a true Yankee. Mickey Mantle, however, felt a hip infection, which caused him to be hospitalized late in the season, and left Maris, the remaining player, with the opportunity to break Babe Ruth's record. In the middle of the season, baseball commissioner Ford Frick, a very good friend of Babe Ruth, announced at the press conference that unless Ruth's game was broken in the first 154 games of the season, the new record should be shown separately in the record books with some distinctive mark. next to it, as had been done in the 162-game season. The asterisk as such, a mark was immediately suggested by the New York Daily News sports writer Dick Young. In spite of its formality, Frick's so-called ruling was merely a suggestion. Major League Baseball had no direct control over any record books until many years later, and as he closed en Ruth's record, Maris received death threats, and the NYPD detective Kieran Burke was assigned to watch over him. Roger Maris had 59 home runs after the Yankees' 154th game, and therefore failed to beat Ruth's record at the original season length. Maris hit his 61st home run on October 1st, 1961, in the fourth inning of the last game of the season at Yankee Stadium in front of 23,000 fans. Red Sox pitcher Tracy Stalingrad gave up the home run record, which was caught by fan Sal Durant in the right field bleachers. Maris was awarded the 1961 Hickok Belt as the top professional athlete of the year in all sports. The American League's MVP for the season, he won the American League MVP for the second straight year. It is said, however, that stress of pursuing the record was so great for Maris that his hair occasionally fell out in clumps during the season. Within a few years, the asterisk controversy died down, and prominent baseball record keepers kept the Maris as the single-season holder. However, for a very long time, it was actually shown in two different ways. It would say Babe Ruth has this record in 154 games, but Maris has this record with the 162 games. In 1962, from 1962 to 1966, Maris made his this is the next part of his career. In 1962, he made his fourth consecutive All-Star appearance and his seventh and final All-Star game appearance. He would make game-saving plays in the bottom of the ninth inning in Game 7 in the 1962 World Series versus the San Francisco Giants, with the Yankees leading 1-0 and Matty Alou on first. Willie Mays doubled down the right field line. Maris cut off the ball with a strong throw to prevent Alou from scoring the tying run, and the following play set up Willie McCovey's series-ending line drive to second baseman Bobby Richardson, capping what would prove to be the final World Series for the old Yankees. In 1963, Maris only played 90 games, hit 23 home runs, and was injured in Game 2 of the 1963 World Series. In 1964, he rebounded, appearing in 141 games, hitting .281, 26 home runs, and Maris hit a home run in Game 6 of the 1964 World Series. In 1965, physical problems returned. He had off-season surgery to remove a bone chip in his hand, and in 1966, Maris' fortunes continued to decline as he played most of the season with a misdiagnosed broken bone in his hand. On December 8th, 1966, he was traded to the Cardinals for Charlie Slim, and then he would spend the remaining 2 years of his career with St. Louis, helping the team win the 1966 and 1968 pennant, as well as the 1967 World Series. In the 67 World Series, he hit .385 with a home run and 7 RBIs, and it was the best performance in the World Series of his career. In the 70s and 80s, Maris and his brother owned and operated Maris Distributing, the Budweiser beer distributor in Gainesville, Florida, and Ocala, Florida, where he moved after retiring from baseball after the 1968 season. Jesse Bush, who owned the Cardinals, and Anheuser-Busch got Maris into the beer business, and Maris also coached in Gainesville's Oak Hill High School, which named its baseball field after him in 1990. Maris was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma in 1983, and in response, the Maris organization, the annual Roger Maris Celebrity Golf Tournament, which raised money for cancer research and treatment. Roger Maris died of the disease at the age of 51 in 1985 at MD Anderson Hospital in Houston, Texas. He was buried at Holy Cross Cemetery in Fargo, North Dakota, and that's where he lies today. This is one of my favorite players of all time. So that's sort of his life story. And despite the comments by Frick in 1961, no asterisk was subsequently used besides Roger Maris in any of the record books. The Guinness Book of World Records, however, did differentiate the home run record between Ruth and Maris. for a number of years. And speaking at the 1980 All-Star Game, he said they acted as though I was doing something wrong, poisoning the record books or something. Do you know I have to show for 61 home runs? Nothing, exactly nothing. All he did was play baseball and happened to hit a few home runs, and he was honestly vilified for it. It's honestly so upsetting when you really look at it. Maris, his home run record was broken in 1998 by Mcguire and Sami Sosa that year, and the Maris family was following Mcguire along. During that 1998 year, Barry Bonds went on to set the new Major League home run record 3 years later in 2001 with 73 home runs, and Maris's home run mark was also surpassed by Mcguire in 1998 by 65, and Sami Sosa broke it a few times with 66 in 1998, 63 in 1999, and 64 home runs in 2001. Mcguire, Sosa, and Bonds, however, have all been linked to performance-enhancing drugs, and so Maris remains the American League record holder for most home runs in a season, sort of like how Babe Ruth and Roger Maris had different records. So nobody has really come close to it in the 60 years since, except for Ken Griffey Jr. in that 1998 year. It was very, very impressive, to say the very least, that his record still kind of stands, even without anybody having sort of a thing against him, and especially with those three guys all having some serious ties to performance enhancing drugs. So Roger Maris was never elected to the Hall of Fame, and in 1977, a sports writer, Greg Hansen, criticized baseball writers in the St. Petersburg Independent for excluding Maris from the Hall of Fame after he only received 72 votes in that year's voting. Hansen noted that there were many Hall of Famer outfielders who had never won MVPs, and that no one else had ever hit 61 home runs in a season. To show you what injustice, quote, to show you what injustice to this man, or is to this man, Maris finished just a notch above Harvey Kuhn, for crying out loud. Hansen wrote that Maris had resented the media's intrusion on his privacy, and said that Maris's tense relationship with the media had affected the voting. Hansen also wrote that Maris had told him after voting that he knew he would never get inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame. Quote, I'll leave the Hall of Fame up to the geniuses that vote on it. I'll never get in. I've always known that. I will not argue about why or why not I should be elected. In 2011, George Vices of the New York Times called Maris a, quote, terrific player for a brief few years. For a few brief years. He wrote that Maris had 2 seasons where he played at Hall of Fame caliber, and while Maris played in an era that was not influenced by performance-enhancing substances, he did not believe that Maris has a career worthy of introduction. I would tend to agree that he probably wasn't a Hall of Famer, even though he had a few really, really good years. I would say that the Baseball Hall of Fame established the Golden Era Committee, replacing the Veteran Committee in 2010, to vote on possible Hall of Fame induction candidates that were overlooked between 1947 and 1972. Beginning in 2011, the committee votes every 3 years on the 10 candidates that should be selected by the Baseball Association of America. Maris has not appeared in 2010, 2014, or 2017, but it is possible that he does get a potential opportunity. In July 2016, 4 new committees were established and is scheduled to vote for the first time in the 2020 or for this past election. Maris is the 24th former player on the Hall of Fame rated list of 85 eligible candidates to get on the ballot. He was a 7-time All-Star, 3 times World Series champion, 2-time American League MVP, 2-time RBI leader, a 1-time Gold Glover, and he has his number retired in the New York Yankees organization. If you look at his stats, just his advanced stats, his WAR is a 38.3. And it's hard to argue for that WAR. It's hard to argue for his average as well. His career batting average was a 260. His career on base percentage was 345. He only hit 275 home runs, only had 850 RBIs. He only had 21 stolen bases as well. So I can understand absolutely how how he doesn't get the or how he would not get into the Hall of Fame. But I think that he deserves it, especially because of how he was vilified by the media. But other players have also been vilified by the media for similar, or for not really doing anything either. So that's Roger Maris's story, guys. Let me know what y'all think. Let me know if y'all want to hear like another one player or something after this episode. Just reach out to us at GSMC _baseball. Let us know what y'all think. Follow us on Twitter, YouTube, Apple Podcasts. Give us a rate, review, and then leave a comment on YouTube if y'all are listening or watching on YouTube. Just let us know what we can do to be better. So thank you guys for listening. I'm Patrick Kenny. Y'all have a great rest of y'all's day.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.